Hello, today's In the Hoop project is the latest in bathroom humor. This design is perfect for framing, or you can stitch it on a towel. The design has several stitching options and sizes. This is the 5x7 version. There's also a 6x10. This is the 7x11, and there's an 8x12 as well. You can stitch the design all on one fabric, plain fabric, no applique. You can add an applique fabric for the outhouse, give it a little more texture and design. You can choose funky colors or plain colors. You can do a plain background, or you can choose a background which has a little more of a woodsy or outdoor theme. One thing that is important is to make sure that you choose colors that are going to show well on your fabric. Make sure your text is going to pop out, and that the green, especially if you have a green background, is going to show up. So let's go ahead and get started with our design. I always start out by printing out my layout guide and instruction. The layout guide is going to let you know what's going on in each run and where you need to take some actions. This will help you keep track of where you are as well as your color selections. The instructions are going to give you an overview of the file so you can select the correct file. It'll also let you know what materials you need and then give you some detailed stitching instructions for each step along the way. For materials, you're going to need a piece of fabric, a little bit larger than your hoop. I've already fused a piece of plain fabric here to some stabilizer and put that in my 5x7 hoop. I'm going to be doing the 5x7 version of the design. I've got a 4x7 piece of fabric for the applique on the outhouse. You'll need a little larger piece if you're doing one of the larger sizes. I've got my little scissors for trimming the applique. I like these. They have a little curve which makes it real easy to get in there and trim nice. And my 505 temporary adhesive. I always spray this on the back of the applique. I don't like to spray that in my sewing room, so you won't see me spraying it, but I will use it on the back of the applique. So we're all ready to get started. I've got my hoop here, and one of the other tips I like to do is to put a piece of colored tape on one side of my hoop. That allows me to keep track of which way it goes into my machine when I take it in and out for the various steps. One of the other things that you want to do before you start sewing, if you have a multi-needle, is to go into the edit mode and add some stops and make sure that all of the colors are set for the colors that work best for your fabrics. So I've already done that, so we're ready to get started sewing. The first run is going to be an outline stitch to show me where to place the fabric. If you do not want the applique, then you could go ahead and skip this run. Just go into your plus minus and go forward 2 color runs, and that will get you where the rest of the design starts stitching. But we'll be stitching the outline here. The first run has completed, so I'm going to take my hoop out of the machine. I'm going to bring it over, and I've got my applique fabric with the 505 on the back, and I'm going to put that down over that run. You can kind of lift the edges to make sure of your position. So I need to go that way just a little bit. So lift the edges to check your position. Just press that firmly in place. The other thing you can do is if you hold this up, you can see the stitching lines there, and you can see the fabric around the stitching line, so I've got enough room there. So I'll put this back in my machine. Make sure you keep it going the right direction, and the design will stitch that fabric in place, and then we'll need to pause and trim the edges. The applique fabric has been stitched in place. We're going to bring that over now and trim those edges. Again, if you wanted the plain version of the design without the fabric in the background, you would skip these first 2 runs. So now all we're going to do is just lift up that edge of the fabric a little bit and pull slightly on it, and just take our little scissors here and just trim right along that edge. I found it helps to pull slightly up on that fabric. It lifts the fabric a little bit and makes it easier to cut close. And again, that little curve on these scissor blades, I find that very handy for getting in close to the stitch line. So again, we'll just trim this as close as we can to those stitches. And a couple more snips and we will be done. So our fabric is trimmed. We'll return the hoop to the machine. Again, note the orientation. Make sure you got it going back the right direction. Now, I don't need it for the 5x7 version of the design, but if you're doing one of the larger versions, because they're 25,000 stitches, you probably want to take an extra layer of stabilizer and just float that. Just slide that right between your design and the bed of your machine. So float that extra layer of stabilizer. Do it after the applique, but before you start the rest of the embroidery. If you do it before the applique, it tends to get folded or caught as you try and move your hoop in and out. So again, for the larger versions of the design, you'll probably want to float an extra layer of stabilizer. Now it will stitch the detail and the outline around the outhouse and then the rest of the text and flowers, and then we'll come back and it'll be done. All right, our design has finished stitching. Thank you, sweetheart. You can take your design off of the machine and go ahead and unhoop your design. You're going to want to trim any jump stitches that might be there. And you'll also want to trim any threads off of the back. So we got a thread there. We got one little jump stitch here to trim. And same one on the other side. And I like to trim these threads on the back, especially if you have a light fabric and dark threads. The threads can show through the fabric on the frame design after you frame it, so it's best to just go ahead and cut those off. So just trim those threads from the back. Now we can go ahead and take and remove our stabilizer. Just going to rip that right off. And then all you'll really need to do now is to get a frame and go ahead and frame your design. Actually, we'll give it a little pressing and then it will be ready for framing. Now this one's probably a little thin. I'll probably would use a border frame around this one. But we'll just give it a quick pressing and it should be set to go. A little spritz to get rid of those wrinkles from the hoop. Okay, our design is pressed, ready to go, ready for framing. So, today's bathroom humor. We hope you've enjoyed today's In the Hoop project. If so, please like and subscribe to this channel for more In the Hoop projects from LLH Embroidery. Happy stitching!